All right, we have certainly quorum. Councillor Hall indicated that she may be perhaps 10 minutes late, so I think all of our necessary staff are assembled, so I will call this regular meeting of Council of the Municipality of Jasper to order for September 17th, 2024. It is 9:30 a.m. Councillors, you have today's proposed agenda. Are there any additions, deletions, or other changes to be made to today's agenda? Councillor Devoted, go ahead.
Yep, thank you very much, Your Worship. I would like to add 3.2, business arising from the minutes, just because we don't have that opportunity set up on this agenda, and just to give councillors an opportunity to maybe ask some outstanding questions from the minutes that are presented in front of us today. And I would also like to add 9.2, if we can do an in-camera, just to go over land / legal.
Thank you for that. Councillor Devoted. Councillor Melnick, I saw your hand as well.
Thank you, Your Worship. If I may, I'd like to add item 6.5, Jasper Transit Service. And I'd like to add another item, 6.6, as it relates to September 30th, the Day of Truth and Reconciliation, how that will relate to municipal services. And I noted it was not on our upcoming events, and just an update of what, how that'll be recognized in the community this year.
Thank you for that. Councillor Melnick. Councillor Keller-Harenthi.
Can I also add in the in-camera 9.3 legal?
Is there anything else? All right, to recap then, I have suggestions for the addition of agenda item 3.2, business arising, 6.5, transit, 6.6, National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, 9.2, did you say legal, Deputy Mayor Demota, and 9.3 was legal from Councillor Keller-Harenthi.
Mine was more land. If Councillor Keller-Harenthi has legal, then that will cover both of them.
Thank you for that. So there are 5 additions. Is there anyone prepared to make a motion that the agenda for today's meeting be amended to include those additional 5 items? Councillor Waxer, thank you for that. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. And may I have a motion then to approve the agenda for today's meeting as amended? Councillor Keller-Harenthi, thank you for that. All those in favor? Sorry, Councillor Wilson, I'm not sure whether you're...
I was in favor.
Yeah. Thank you. All right, thank you all. We have an agenda for today's meeting. That takes us to agenda item 3.1. We have before us the minutes of the regular meeting of September 10th. Are there any errors, omissions, or corrections required to be made to those minutes? If not, I would look for a motion to approve the minutes of the September 10th, 2024 regular meeting as presented. Thank you, Councillor Melnick. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. And we've added agenda item 3.2, business arising. Is there any business arising from the minutes of September 10th, 2024? Deputy Mayor Demota.
Thank you. I know that we don't have Ms. Saunders today slated for discussion. Just to follow up with administration through you, Your Worship, to our CAO. I just wanted to see, because I brought it up at the last meeting, on if there has been any progress with Parks Canada in people needing physical plans for their houses, and to see if the Parks office is now open to receive requests, and how the progress with that is going. Sorry to put you on the spot.
Your Worship, for Deputy Mayor Demota, I see Director Sanders is here, and she may be able to share a bit of update. This is off the cuff, and so maybe a little bit more challenging, but Director Sanders.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship. Parks Canada is available for requests for plans. The information is on their website. I'll circulate that to you, Council, immediately. And I think it's taking time for them to locate plans, but they're certainly open and available to receiving those requests and then finding those physical construction plans for folks. So I'll send the link to you that you can share with any residents. I also understand that Parks is going to have some more detailed information come out shortly on this front. And I think when that happens, that will answer many questions. So stay tuned is my answer. Yeah.
Okay, that's good. I didn't want to leave that hanging, and because some people are in different stages and are in different situations with their plans. So that's good to hear, and I appreciate the follow-up.
Thank you for that. Welcome, Councillor Hall, who has now joined us. Is there any other business arising from the minutes of the regular meeting of September 10th? Seeing no hands, I will move to agenda item 4, delegations. We have with us today the executive director, the new executive director of the Jasper Park Chamber of Commerce. I saw him recently. There he is again. Welcome, Mr. Butler. Congratulations on your new role. I understand that this might be your second day on the job in this new capacity. You've certainly picked an eventful time to re-embark on your very long-standing personal commitment to the community and to the Jasper Park Chamber of Commerce in particular. So welcome. It's great to see you in virtual council chambers once again, as you were through all of COVID. So thank you. Welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ireland. Can you hear me?
We can, yes.
Oh, good. Thank you very much. And indeed, you're right. This is my second day in my new role. I've been in this role for 25 hours now, and I'm happy to say that I'm still excited and energized after 25 hours in the role. So thank you very much for Mayor and Council and Mr. Given and administration for giving me this opportunity. My primary objective here really is just to introduce myself in my new role. I'd like to share a couple of thoughts, and well, I have a little ask at the end, because why would I come to Council without an ask? So I really am looking forward to working with Council, administration, and the community at large in this new role. You're right, Mr. Ireland, that this was not what I expected when I first began talking about taking on this role. The role now is, I think, helping to save the Chamber of Commerce, as our organization has taken a huge blow, so that we can continue to serve our community, and in particular business, and to help restore the business community as quickly and as efficiently as possible. The path ahead is uncertain and daunting, and the Chamber is ready to help in any way that we're able. And that is my primary message today. And with that in mind, I want to acknowledge and thank Council for adding a seat on the Recovery Advisory Committee for the Chamber. And you can rely on us to be a productive contributor in that particular role and any others that we may find we can assist with. I think everyone knows more or less what the Chamber is about, but I'm going to devote a moment to just touch on our primary roles. And our core mandate is a three-way mandate. It is to advocate for our members and businesses and our community generally. It is to function as a liaison between government and business, and it is to fill an advisory role to government on behalf of business. And we provide various other supports for our members that I won't go into today. But in thinking about that sort of triunity role of advocacy and advisor and liaison, I want to say that for the Jasper Park Chamber to serve the community effectively, we need council and administration to recognize the Chamber as the legitimate and acknowledged representative of the business in Jasper. And I understand that that indeed implies a measure of mutual respect between the Chamber and its partner organizations. And in my role, I intend to earn your respect, and I hope that the Chamber will be thought of as an organization that is there to consult with, to serve as liaison, and to provide advice when Council is making the many consequential decisions, you will, that affect business, because of course those decisions that affect business will affect our community deeply. I think that when the Chamber's role is effectively exercised, those core functions that I mentioned should, and I think they will be, welcomed and appreciated and supported by government. And that is my hope, particularly in the coming difficult few years ahead of us. I feel like now more than ever, a strong Chamber is essential to our mutual success. I'd like to talk a little bit about the future of business in Jasper. More than 40 businesses in multiple structures were destroyed in the fire, with others being severely affected. That number of businesses is not always apparent if you navigate your way through the burned areas. And it's important to recognize that most of the affected businesses were tenants, and they did not own their own spaces. Some, of course, do. But that alone places businesses in a difficult situation because you're navigating the landlord-tenant relationship in addition to everything else that you have to think about. The loss of all those businesses is likely to lead to serious economic deterioration over the next several years, and the Chamber is really concerned about that. On your agenda today, you're looking at the hard reality of this loss to the assessment base, and the math is sobering. And so I commend administration for the clear and convincing report that you're going to be dealing with today about that revenue loss as we move into the future. And I thank you for considering early and immediate tax relief for evacuation and for those who lost their homes in commercial buildings. When you look at the fire map, it's clear that geographically the community sustained a much broader loss to residential areas than commercial, and that is evident from the map. And I just want to say that my heart goes out to every individual and family who lost their home, and to say my heart breaks with yours. And you know, against that backdrop of heartache and tragedy, it seems almost disingenuous to want to talk now about economics, but as your agenda makes clear, we do have to talk about that, and sooner is better than later. From a financial perspective, I think it's going to be important to recognize that the loss of commercial infrastructure will have a disproportionate impact on the municipality's income potential due to our asymmetrical mill rate. So the loss of $1 million of commercial build assets may have up to 5 times the revenue impact to the municipality relative to the loss of similar value of residential. So when thinking about businesses that have survived, it goes beyond what was burned down, because the surviving businesses face real uncertainty, likely loss of trade and commerce in coming years. Visitation to Jasper is a huge unknown. And that loss of trade could lead to property devaluation and consequent assessment decline over the next few years. It will recover, but I fear a considerable drop in assessment valuations. So economic strain is going to be part of the municipality's future, and I emphasize that, though I know that council is aware of that. And that's going to be on top of the severe emotional and social strain already affecting us. So I've met with a lot of businesses in the past couple of weeks, and of course they're really worried. Many don't know where to turn. They want to make sure their voices are heard, their perspective is understood, and they want the chamber to bring that perspective to council, and I intend to work hard to do that. I'm already hearing of several businesses whose premises survived but are doubtful that they're going to be able to reopen, and I'm really saddened by that. Many, particularly the smaller ones, simply lack the resources, the experience, the built-in resiliency to even begin to know how to deal with such a disaster. And I'm learning that business interruption insurance can be surprisingly limited. So they face, as I mentioned, dealings with landlords, search for alternative premises, uncertainty about finding staff because there's nowhere for staff to live, not being able to arrange accommodations for their staff if they were able to hire any, trying to source relief funding. There are just a few of the immediate concerns they face. And the business community is part of our community, and these businesses are our employers, their owners and staff are our neighbors. They're part of the heart and soul and the social fabric of Jasper. And, you know, to a great extent, we need to recognize that the many diverse small businesses in our little town are what make us unique as a community, and they are what make Jasper unique as a destination. And that is critically important moving forward, that Jasper do everything we can to remain an attractive destination. So council is right to focus now on rebuilding our infrastructure and our homes and on social impacts, but I encourage you to attend to mitigating a future community-wide economic downturn and to consider the importance of business rebuilding in the recovery process. So that brings me to my ask. I appreciate that last week, one of the 8 recovery effort positions titles was amended to include the words small business. And thank you for that. But I am concerned that it's not going to be enough. And I am echoing a letter that appeared on council's agenda just before I was installed in my new position. And honestly, I'm doubtful that a piece of a multifaceted position is likely to be adequate to give our businesses the help that they need during recovery. I've come to realize that in disaster recovery, virtually all provincial resources will be channeled to the municipality. And that is as it is, and I think it is as it should be. But it means that it's up to the municipality to decide how those resources will be expended. So you have the resources and you have all the tools. And so I'm asking today that one of those 8 positions be dedicated specifically and entirely to business and economic recovery. I don't think it's a really big ask. I think it's worth consideration. Being mindful that business owners, as business recovers, so too will our community recover economically. So I ask that council give serious consideration to this request, and I would be more than happy to meet with administration or councillors to discuss and look at, you know, how that might work and would achieve overall benefit to the community. So in closing, and to sum up, thank you once again for allowing me to speak to you today. I promise that Jasper Park Chamber will be an engaged and active contributor as our community moves through the coming phases of rebuilding. We will be an effective advocate, an advisor, and a liaison. We look forward to our first meeting with the Recovery Advisory Committee, and I will say I hope that meeting will be soon. So thank you once again for allowing me to introduce myself, share some thoughts, and I welcome any questions from any of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Butler for a number of things, including, among others, your heartfelt condolences to those who have lost their homes. But I know that you are among them, and we send to you our condolences for the loss of your home as well. Like so many others, we know that you too are struggling through the current situation with a role that you have fulfilled tremendously well here today, and at the same time you are dealing with your own personal loss. So I really do appreciate that you're able to focus your attention as you have on the needs of the organization which you now represent. So credit to you. And thank you for...
And you and the several councillors who have lost their homes, certainly I echo that. It is challenging and difficult to hone in and focus on business that needs to be done when your personal life has been completely disrupted. So thank you.
And again, thank you for what I think is the clarity of your ask. And why else would you come if you didn't have an ask, as you say? But I wonder, before I turn to councillors for questions, if I might ask administration potentially to confirm the positions that have been added and the designations, just so that we have clarity as we begin our discussion. Mr. Given?
Thanks very much, Your Worship. Mr. Butler is correct. If we look at the minutes from the September 3rd meeting, that position was, the small business focus was integrated into the combined recovery liaison and information coordinator position. That was not my understanding of council's intent. As Mr. Butler was presenting, I was a bit confused and had to look at the minutes. So I see that he's literally correct in terms of how it was reflected. My understanding, though, of council's intent was that was intended to be a net new additional position. So essentially talking about 9 positions rather than 8. That was my understanding from the meeting. Obviously, it wasn't captured in the minutes that way, and that's something administration and I should have caught. But certainly I was acting under the assumption that we're going to have a dedicated small business recovery position, because I understood that that's what council was looking for. So we'll look to correct that. I thank Mr. Butler for bringing that to our attention, because I was under the assumption that we're moving on with 9 positions, not 8.
Well, imagine that, Mr. Butler. Success already.
Well, thank you. That is tremendously good news. I am very pleased to hear that, and even more pleased that it appears it was already understood that way, and I indeed did not understand that was the intent. So I appreciate it, and our members in business as well. Thank you.
Thank you both. Councillors, Mr. Butler is here and available, as he indicated, for questions that you may have. Are there questions from councillors to the new executive director of the Jasper Park Chamber of Commerce? Go ahead, Councillor Wilson.
No question, just a brief little story. Early days, I ran into Mr. Butler on the trail. I tried to coerce him into putting his name back in to get back on council, because I really enjoyed working with him. And with previous council, he was aloof, and I think he knew that he was considering a different role. And I'm so happy to see him in this position, and again, looking forward to working with him closely in the coming year.
Thank you so much. I will try not to be aloof, and indeed I knew, but it was not confirmed, and so I felt it wasn't appropriate to say anything, though I wanted to. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Questions from other councillors? Deputy Mayor Demota?
Not questions, but just happy to see Paul back being active in the community, and this role I think is going to be very important for business and for us as well. And I'm looking forward to more open communication. I've always respected Mr. Butler's Paul. I've always respected your attention to detail, particularly in the finance area, and I look forward to your accountability to the community and holding us accountable too. So I'm really grateful and happy that you're there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Keller-Grenpe and Councillor Waxer.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. I just want to welcome Mr. Butler. It's quite exciting. Back in my old career, when I was at the Chamber, I started out when Mr. Butler was the treasurer, then the secretary, the vice president, then the president of the Chamber. They're so lucky to have found you, Mr. Butler, for this position, because I think you bring a wealth of knowledge to it, and I'm excited with you in the future.
Thank you, Councillor.
Councillor Waxer.
I too would just like to offer congratulations and express great appreciation for the fact that you will be in this most important role at this very, very critical time. And thinking of the articulate way you presented, I have just enormous confidence that you will be a tremendous advocate, liaison, and advisor in these times. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. You need to take it easy on me. This is flattering. Thank you so much.
Councillor Hall.
Mayor Ireland, and I too wish to offer congratulations, Mr. Butler. I welcome your leadership. I'm very excited to collaborate with you, work towards shared goals. I'm especially grateful for your commitment to Jasper during these very challenging times as we recover and rebuild. I really look forward to productive partnership under your leadership.
As do I. Thank you.
Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Your Worship. My people who spoke prior to myself have expressed everything I wanted to about welcoming Paul back to the Chamber and the history, and relayed a little bit about the Robson House, where I believe, along with the former Councillor Joe Couture, as President, Paul Butler was instrumental, I think, in the Robson House relocation and becoming the home of the Chamber. So welcome home. And I am wondering if Robson House is available to accept visitors. Are you working out of the Robson House as yet, or will that be a work in progress until you can meet with the individuals at that location? But again, congratulations on becoming the executive director of the Chamber.
Thank you very much, Councillor Melnick, and good question. So first of all, your query about the Robson House has reminded me to mention my thanks to administration, and specifically in this case to Gordon Hutton, for providing a lot of assistance in helping us deal with a flood that occurred in the basement. I believe it was a sewage backup. It seems to be connected with fire, but I don't know that anyone knows why. But anyway, that assistance is hugely appreciated. It kind of looks like I'm not going to have to do much to deal with that problem. So no, we are not back in the Robson House. In fact, we can't really be there until an air quality test result comes back. And then we're still sorting out technology and computer and all of that sort of thing, because all of that sort of collapsed with that flood. But I think we will be using our space in the building within, I'm hopeful, a week or so, if not sooner. And I will push notice out to the community through email and social media at that time. And then we indeed do look forward to welcoming the community into the Robson House. I had forgotten how beautiful that space is. I hadn't been in it for a few years. And I'm looking forward to being there. And I will be establishing regular office hours once we can get back in. So thanks for the question.
All right, thank you all, and in particular, thank you, Mr. Butler, for your presentation today. I trust that you will return to the executive and the board of directors of the Jasper Park Chamber of Commerce and instill upon them, with no uncertain terms, that a mere 25.5 hours into your new role, you have already achieved success. So let them know about that, and thank you for your presentation here today, and we look forward to welcoming you back on future occasions.
Much appreciation to all of you. Thank you so much.
That takes us to agenda item 5, correspondence. We have a request from CN Rail for a proclamation for Rail Safety Week in the municipality of Jasper. Are there any questions or comments about that correspondence, or is there a councillor prepared to make a motion that we proclaim Rail Safety Week in the municipality of Jasper for the week of September 23rd to 29, 2024? Councillor Waxer?
I make that motion that we, the municipality of Jasper, proclaim the week of September 23rd to the 29th as Rail Safety Week 2024.
Thank you for that motion, Councillor Waxer. Any debate or comments on that motion? Seeing nothing, I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Thank you. I will find Ms. Acorn after these proceedings and get a physical copy of that proclamation to sign on behalf of council. That takes us to agenda item 6, new business, 6.1, tax relief and revenue losses. And I will turn to CAO Given for that report.
Thanks very much, Your Worship. I'm here today with a recommendation to council related to both financial supports for affected property owners in Jasper, as well as some of the implications and dealing with the implications of losses in the municipality's property tax base. Now, the report has 3 recommendations. The first, that council approve, subject to provincial financial support, canceling or refunding the municipal portion of property taxes and the Evergreens requisition, according to criteria that I'll speak to later on in the report. 2, that council requests the government of Alberta likewise cancel or refund the 2024 education tax levy to be consistent with the approach of the municipality in canceling that tax levy. Our tax levies rather. And 3, that council requests the government of Alberta provide funding to offset losses in core municipal revenue from 2024 to 2027. Your Worship, maybe I'll go to the heart of the matter, as council well knows, and as we heard even from Mr. Butler earlier on. The impact of the wildfire obviously has broad and deep social impacts across our community, but it also has some very practical impacts that the municipality needs to account for. At an initial count, we see just under $300 million in property tax assessment. So assessed value of properties was likely lost. This has a resulting impact in the municipality's ability to generate revenue. The Alberta Disaster Recovery Program is the way that the province provides support to municipalities dealing with disasters such as ours. And it is intended to support municipalities with extraordinary expenses related to disasters. It does require that 10% municipal contribution. But the program does not specifically address municipal revenue losses. So in Jasper's case, as you'll see in the report, we estimate that the total loss, the value of the property tax revenue for 2024 from the properties that were lost would be just over $2 million. And if council were to provide a accommodation financial support for properties that were evacuated during the evacuation period, that would be an additional $1 million. The municipality of Jasper in our 2024 approved budget was only imagining bringing in just over $11 million in property tax revenue. So this is nearly 30% of our property tax revenue that would be lost if council were to support these recommendations. Of course, in 2025, municipal property tax revenue would rebound slightly. The properties that were lost would see their assessment adjusted down to essentially the bare land value. And so their property taxes would also decline down to that bare land value. This would mean, though, that either municipal revenue would shrink, or if municipal revenue was to stay consistent, that burden would have to be picked up by remaining properties. And essentially, we would see a tax shift that would shift that burden to other properties. That obviously would add to the financial stress that many businesses and leaseholders are facing as they recover from the wildfire. The municipality also will see a loss in other revenue. Some current year revenues, such as paid parking and transit fares. Obviously, during the evacuation period, neither one of those revenue sources were collected. And particularly in the case of paid parking, as council knows, it is one revenue source that is flexible for the municipality, and we had expected approximately $1.3 million, had budgeted for $1.3 million in paid parking revenue in this year. Administration estimates that between paid parking, utility revenue, and transit fares, we can expect to see an additional $1.7 million in revenue loss in this calendar year. So taken together, the recommended property tax waivers under that total loss amount and base amount, and the loss in other revenue, the municipality is facing a very significant hole in our current year revenue. As I said before, asking the remaining tax base to make up for that revenue loss could become excessive and cause significant financial strain on homeowners and businesses. Should council choose an alternative of essentially reducing core municipal expenditures, this would reduce core municipal services to an extent that would be even greater than we saw during the COVID pandemic and more impactful. That reduction in core services, administration believes, would ultimately both prolong the community's recovery and further damage the destination's reputation with visitors, which obviously are untenable and undesirable as we look to recover from the wildfire. The government of Alberta has, in previous instances, provided funding to municipalities for both of these recommendations. First, in providing a property tax waiver for affected properties and for evacuated properties. And the provincial government has also previously provided essentially revenue stabilization for municipalities that underwent similar situations, losing significant amounts of their property tax base due to a disaster. We saw the same in a similar approach in Slave Lake and in Wood Buffalo. And in fact, administration's recommendation of proposed criteria for the property tax waiver cancellation are modeled off of what was supported and passed in Wood Buffalo following their wildfire. So, Your Worship, I will maybe turn it back to council. I think the report is fairly comprehensive. In essence, administration is recommending that council approve canceling or refunding the municipal portion of the municipal property tax and Evergreen's requisition, subject to provincial financial support. And I want to be very clear because I think it will be important that residents and businesses, leaseholders, property taxpayers, understand what this recommendation is. It is a recommendation that council support doing that, but that we have to ensure that the municipality can receive some revenue to fill that gap from the provincial government before we could actually activate that recommendation. So there would be some follow-up, and I don't want anybody to get be under the understanding that once council approves this, that would immediately be applied. This recommendation is contingent upon receiving external financial support to fill that hole in the municipality's property tax base. The second recommendation is that the government essentially match what we're doing for 2024 and cancel or refund the education requisition. And then that final recommendation is that council begin the conversation with the government of Alberta to help stabilize Jasper's core municipal revenue beyond 2024 and likely out to 2027. And essentially starting a negotiation or conversation with the province about what that might look like, so we can continue to deliver the services that residents and businesses depend on and that keep Jasper an attractive destination for visitors. Your Worship, I'm happy to answer any questions attached to the report. You'll see the property tax roll and the specifics of all the cancellation and the impacts that would have on individual properties. And you'll also see in attachment 3 the technical version of the criteria that we're recommending for waivers. But the essence is that if you were evacuated, it would be 1/12 of your property tax, or 1 month of your property taxes. And that for property taxes that were destroyed, that they would see that the taxes canceled or refunded for the balance of the year. I'm happy to answer any questions, Your Worship.
Thank you for that report, CAO Given. Just before I turn the matter to councillors for questions, I will exercise the prerogative of the chair, which I very rarely do, but I wish to ask an initial question of you, Mr. Given, in order to, I hope, protect the integrity of the coming discussion and any subsequent decision that council may make. I'm aware that there will be a direct pecuniary benefit, if it can be called that, to councillors, particularly the 4 councillors who have lost their homes as a result of this. I know that in the material that you have presented as part of your report, the tax roll for my home appears, and I can see that if council agrees to cancel or refund municipal taxes for destroyed properties, I will receive a particular benefit of just over $2,300. Others will also receive benefits. And we know that under provincial legislation, we are prohibited from voting on matters where there is a direct pecuniary benefit. In order to deal with that up front and before we get into discussions, I take it that administration has looked into that particular question and can address whether or not any councillor would be facing any degree of conflict in this matter. And with particular attention to the fact that if that is the case, 4 councillors are most directly impacted, which represents a majority of council, leaving the other 3 without quorum to move forward whatsoever. But is administration able to respond to that general question and assure both council and the community that this is an appropriate area in which all councillors can engage?
Your Worship, thanks for raising the question early on. I'm happy to respond. So administration has looked at this issue, and this is similar to when council sets property tax rates for the entire municipality. Each of you are residents of the municipality who are required to pay property taxes similar to anyone else. And in this case, you're also a part of a much larger class of residents. So this is council making a decision that impacts a very broad class. And as you'll see from the attached tax rolls, there's many, many property owners that are in this class, as you referenced a majority of council members. And so this doesn't rise to the level of conflict of interest because it isn't dealing on something that impacts an individual council member exclusively. You can see that council members here are a part of a very broad class of residents and leaseholders who are impacted. And I can give council assurance that in other cases, other municipalities, council members have voted on similar recommendations. So no, there's no concern about conflict of interest on this item.
Thank you very much, CAO Given, for that reassurance. And I will then turn it to councillors for any questions they may have with respect to the report and the recommendations from administration. Councillor Keller-Herenthy.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. To you, to Mr. Given. What's the normal timeline with the government getting back to us with a timeline that people may, if we get this funding?
Your Worship, for Councillor Keller-Herenthy, I certainly don't want to say that there's any normal timeline for anything over the last little while. I will say that the government of Alberta has been very responsive and supportive of all of our work that we're doing with them. I believe that there's a cabinet committee, Jasper Recovery Committee, that is meeting either daily or weekly. And so I would expect that it would be a high priority for the government to address the matter in one way or another. And I know that they're meeting frequently to discuss matters related to Jasper. So I wouldn't expect that it would take a long time. I would imagine it would be in the next couple of weeks where we would have a response to that. And then, of course, there'd be, if the response was favorable, and again, just making sure that people have the right expectations, there'd be the administrative matter of going through and processing these refunds, which could take some time as well. So again, I just want to set those expectations so that people appreciate that there'd be some process, but I don't believe that the government of Alberta would be a hindrance in that. They have been meeting frequently and have been very responsive and a fantastic partner.
Thank you for that, Mr. Given. May I, Mayor Ireland, ask one more question?
Go ahead, Councillor Keller-Granty.
Just on the Evergreen refund, then my understanding would be that it wouldn't be Evergreen refunding it, it would be the Alberta government that would be refunding it. Am I correct?
Your Worship, we may need to work out the semantics of that, but the intent here is that the municipality would receive enough financial support to enable us to allow Evergreens to keep their requisition, which I imagine may have already been paid, or at least a portion of it already been paid, and essentially refund the residents that value of the requisition. Obviously that requisition is important to the operation of Evergreens across our region, in support of seniors across the region. And so the intent here is that Evergreens Foundation would be kept whole, but the residents would receive the same amount back without having an impact on the Evergreens operations.
Thank you for that, Mr. Given. And we did discuss it at our board meeting last Friday. And we do know that for 2025, our assessment will be lower, and that will be expected by the board.
Deputy Mayor Demota and then Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Worship. Not sure. Well, I do have a question later on, but just around the revenue stabilization conversation. And I think it's really important for this council to escalate the advocacy for tourism-based economies, with the acknowledgement that our annual budget, 1/3 of it goes to support visitor services. And I think it's an opportune time for us to work with other communities that may fall into the tourism-based economy category, as well as industry partners that will help champion us to get some different type of status in order to get different funding to help our community out. And I think even on a different level, we did get promises from the provincial and federal government on future support. And I think, and I feel that we should advocate in some help in that 10% makeup of what the municipality needs to come up with to put towards our finances. And I, particularly in the commercial area, those businesses that could have that extra 10% relief to put that towards their own business operations, because ultimately, my sense is speaking to people that are in the industry, that they're going to have to pass that along through their product, and essentially inflating something that is already at a high cost. So it's going to cause some instability in our financial market here, as far as what is offered by our business community, whether it's retail or restaurants. I think that we need to advocate strongly at higher levels to make up and find that extra 10%, so that we're not putting that burden on the existing properties that are here. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think I'd like to first lead with recognizing the amount of work that was done by administration. We're 2 months after the fire. Early in our meetings, we did identify to administration, council identified the thought of compensating and looking at refunds for tax relief. And I have to commend administration for the extent of work that's been done on this particular file to be able to come to council with recommendations. I can only imagine how difficult it was to get accurate information for each leaseholder, each property, each business, to be able to come forward with this type of information and then do the compilation of the overall effect of the taxes that'll be affecting our community. And I think that needs to be definitely on top of everything else going on, the type of thing that goes on behind the scenes that people may or may not recognize. So first of all, thank you to administration, the finance department, and anyone involved who were able to bring this request for decision forward. And I'd like to pick up on Councillor Demota's point. We're specifically speaking about the provincial government here and their responsibility as it relates to municipalities. In our unique situation, we're a provincial municipality within a federal jurisdiction, and the provision of services to 10,000 square kilometers of a national park depends on this particular community to support the operations of Parks Canada. And if we're looking for opportunities for support in that 10% that we have to find, I would encourage administration that our federal counterparts may have some opportunity to assist the municipality, as we are going to be on an ongoing basis supporting the national park. I look forward to Mr. Given, if there's a thought on that, or your worship, if you have a thought on that in provincial federal relations in our unique scenario with this wildfire.
Go ahead, Mr. Given.
Your worship, certainly Councillor Melnick raised it, and first, Councillor Melnick, thanks very much. I'll pass on your accommodation to the rest of the team that assembled this report. A lot of work, obviously, in our finance department under really difficult situations, so thanks for that recognition. Councillor Melnick raised an important point, and I think it would be very reasonable if council wanted to amend or adjust the third bullet point recommendation that references the government of Alberta. We could also add potentially the federal government, which would be the largest umbrella, recognizing that Parks Canada is within the is an agency of the federal government. But we could add that council requests the government of Alberta and government of Canada provide financial support. That would give clear indication to administration that we should follow up with those respective entities. Obviously land rent is something that is particular to Jasper's case. That is through Parks Canada, but likely we'd want to start that conversation at the federal government level, and they could take it down to the agency level.
Thank you for that. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, sorry, just to speak on that same topic, is there a federal program similar to the Alberta Disaster Recovery Program? I'd like to keep these separate. I think that, this discussion is property tax based and, for sure should be focused to the province. And I would suspect that 10% is not enough support that we need from the feds. I think that there should be stepping up this, not to point fingers or not pointing fingers. I'm just suggesting that this was a federal fire, or this was a fire on federal lands, and it came into our municipality. And I do believe that there is, and I'm just assuming that there is, but I would suspect that there is a program or that there is additional funding that we can be seeking. I think this property tax item should stay separate, and the province assist us with that. But yes, I really do think that there should be some advocacy to seek further funds. And Mr. Given, I guess you could just answer the question if you know of a similar program to the disaster recovery program that the province offers.
Your worship, for Councillor Wilson, thanks very much for the question. So I think it's important that the public, we've been talking about the disaster recovery program as a provincial program, and it is actually technically a shared program between the province and the federal government. I can share a link with council, but the federal government has something called the Disaster Financial Assistance Arrangements, or DFAA. And the description of that program from the Government of Canada says, in the event of a large-scale natural disaster, the Government of Canada provides financial assistance to provincial and territorial governments through the Disaster and Financial Assistance Arrangements, DFAA, administered by Public Safety Canada. So, and as I understand it, and again, I'm not a technical expert in this, but there's essentially a cost-sharing formula for disaster financial assistance between the provincial government and federal government. And under the program criteria of this DFAA, it shows that, that there's essentially a sliding scale, that as the amount goes up, the Government of Canada's share increases. And so I believe that the DRP program, the provincial DRP program, is an expression of this relationship in Alberta. So essentially, my understanding is that federal support for disasters flows through the provinces. And in Alberta's case, that flow through is in the disaster recovery program. So obviously the government of Alberta makes contributions from its own revenue to support the DRP, the provincial program, but excess amounts beyond a certain threshold start to become a greater and greater responsibility of the federal government. And so this is an example of the systems that are at play in our country, where provincial and federal governments essentially collaborate together on an approach. It's obviously very much behind the scenes for the general public. But council and the public should know that in essence, the federal government is a participant in large-scale disaster recovery through provincial programs. So direct to Councillor Wilson's question, do we know of a federal program? No, we don't. And my understanding is that this DFAA is essentially that federal support which funnels through provincial programs. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Mr. Given. Councillor Waxer.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland, through you to CAO Given. I have a recollection that you had indicated that the 10% municipal contribution was new, and I wondered whether how new it was, whether it applied to Fort McMurray, or if we have examples where where communities have borne the brunt of that 10% and how they fared.
Your Worship, for Councillor Waxer. So my understanding is that the DRP program changes are actually relatively new. I believe that they were in 2021. I would need to, it is 2021. Sorry, I'm just also referencing my materials here. So it was relatively new. And so we haven't seen, this would have been following Wood Buffalo, following High River, and following, the 2013 floods and Slave Lake. So this Jasper would be the first urban center to face this, and certainly the first disaster of this scale to face this 10% cost share. I think it's reasonable to say that is an additional discussion that we will need to have with the government of Alberta. Obviously, their intent of the changes to the program may not have considered large-scale disasters like this that would have such a significant impact on municipal revenues. Obviously, the idea of the municipality at some point needing to come up with additional cash to contribute our 10%. And sorry, I shouldn't even say that. Actually, the way the DRP program is set up in the legislation is that the municipal share would be discounted from what is the funding that is provided. So essentially, they would pay us 90%. And keeping that 10%, which would mean that we would have to come up with it somewhere else, to contribute it. So it's not as though the government would make us pay 10% to them. They just would only pay 90% of the eligible expenses. Again, I think that that's how the legislation reads. That is what the legislation says. I think there's a conversation to be had with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs about how that application of the legislation would impact Jasper.
Go ahead, Councillor Waxer.
I just had a follow-up question. Would the 10% rule apply in other provinces or only in Alberta?
Your worship, so that is specific to the Alberta Disaster Recovery Program. Again, this is that provincial-federal relationship is outside of the program and essentially flows through the disaster recovery program. Other provinces would have their own approaches to dealing with municipalities on disaster recovery.
Thank you very much.
Deputy Mayor Demota and then Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't want to jeopardize any discussions that have been ongoing with the federal government and the Parks Canada agency. They've been very open and helpful so far. But I like where Councillor Wilson was kind of directing his thoughts, and you know, us being in a federal park, and when we talk about you know, some type of negotiation for land rent, you know, the reason that's there is, you know, for our community footprint in the national park is to ensure a fair return to all Canadians, because the park belongs to all Canadians. And I think because of this disaster, whatever comes of, you know, the decision on the land rent itself, if it is substantially lower than what we've been paying, then I think that, you know, it would be reasonable to think that maybe we've been overpaying over time, you know, even though that was the agreement of the day. I think that, you know, for some of that funding that's gone from the community to Parks Canada for that fair return, I think we could easily argue that in fair return to help us out through this time, we should be able to go and have an ask and some help there. And I hope they're open to that conversation, because I think there's an opportunity there to get some extra funding when we have that discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hall.
Mayor Ireland, I think there absolutely has to be a conversation with Minister McIver. These numbers in front of us today are for only 2024, am I correct? 2025 is another story. This could be pushing $10 million. We can't afford $1 million like that. We will need to advocate for that 10%.
Thank you for that. In the absence of other questions or of hands up, I have a question, Mr. Given, and I begin by joining with Councillor Melnick in expressing the highest level of gratitude to administration and the folks in finance in particular for putting together the details of the material that appears in our agenda. I had one question, which I will simply leave with you and administration to potentially ask at another time, or to answer, I should say, at another time. But on page, I think it's 34, roll number 006900, just is confusing to me. And we are talking global numbers, so it doesn't necessarily matter. We're talking a huge scale, but those numbers just don't seem to add up to me. What I'm more interested in, though, is, as Councillor Hall just alluded to, the fact that this will be a continuing issue. And so you have very detailed numbers for 2024. But it occurs to me that beyond all of the property loss and the actual loss to our assessment base, the non-residential assessment base is based on income. And when the assessor looks at income, they take, I think, 50% of the most recent year, 30% of the year before that, and 20% of the year before that. And on that, they base income, and the income is used to determine the assessment. We have just lost now 2 of the best months of this year, and more to come. So income for next year, upon which assessors will assess non-residential property is going to be down, which means our tax base is going to get even lower before it starts to recover. And so those factors will influence 2025, 2026, and 2027, I would think. And while I appreciate that you can't do the calculation because we don't know the income hit, I just ask that those be kept in mind when we go to the provincial government to look for long-term funding, that we have not hit the bottom yet. We will still suffer further assessment-based deterioration next year based on the loss of income. I do have a question in all of this, and this is from the very last page of the report. And I am curious as to why we would select August 16th as the effective date and not July 24th, which was the date of the destruction of properties, as opposed to the date of re-entry. And although, again, that may be minor, I just wonder about why that re-entry date and not the actual date of loss.
Your worship, they're essentially stacking. So the 1/12, what we're calling the base cancellation amount, would be applied to all properties. And then following the re-entry, August 16th, the destroyed properties receive an additional benefit from August 16th forward. So everybody would receive the waiver during the time when we were evacuated. The remainder of the properties that were destroyed would receive an additional waiver from August 16th to the end of the year.
Understood. Thank you. Deputy Mayor Demota.
Yeah, I wanted to thank administration as well for the detailed information here. And, I encourage people that are viewing and maybe sharing with the people that aren't viewing, friends or acquaintances, community members, on the extensive work that's been done here. We've received, and me personally, communication on what exactly are we doing, because people that are observing us don't get to see the day-to-day things that we're doing, and particularly administration. And they're working very hard. Everyone's working very hard. And, I just want to iterate the fact that although things in some areas might look like they're at a standstill, people are constantly negotiating. We're having meetings at different levels, and we're continuing trying to progress through this disaster and recovery. So, I'd also like, again, to say, commending administration for coming up with this information and the continuing hard work behind the scenes. And then to you, fellow councillors, as well, because I know that you're very much engaged with community members and with other people that are concerned about our community. And it's nice to see, whether it's positive and sometimes a little negative, the passion that people have for Jasper, not only within the community, but people that have a big heart for our town.
If there are no further questions for administration, or there may be, Councillor Melnick, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just for sake of quick question, have we assessed the Lake Edith properties in this particular valuation of taxes, or is that a separate document specific to those? Oh, I do see Lake Edith in there. Okay, so pardon me, I missed that earlier because of the extent of the document. So we have captured all of the residents who contribute to our taxes, evergreen, and education.
Thank you, Councillor Melnick. Deputy Mayor Demota.
Thank you very much. Just for personal notation here, you made reference to a page and line item number, and I wasn't fast enough in scrolling to pick that up, and I was just wondering if you could repeat that so I can can look at it.
It was on page 34 of our electronic agenda, and it is roll number 006900. And I only mention it because those numbers don't add up. They are significant, but to my mind, they didn't quite add up.
All right. Did you go through every single line item?
I happened to pick that one up. Deputy Mayor DeMota. And you can see why it is.
Yeah, no, for sure.
A significant number.
Yep.
All right. Is there a councillor prepared to make a motion or a series of motions at this time? Councillor Wilson, thank you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I can jump in there. I'd be willing to make the recommendation, or sorry, the motion that council approve, subject to provincial financial support, to cancel or refund the municipal portion of property taxes and the Evergreens requisition according to the criteria as presented, and that council requests that the government of Alberta to cancel or refund 2024 education tax levy to be consistent with the canceled portions of municipal property taxes. Cancellation criteria as presented, as well that council requests the government of Alberta to provide funding to offset losses in core municipal revenue from 2024 to 2027.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wilson, for that series of motions. Of course, it would be open to division if anybody wants to request division of those three motions. If not, I will open it to debate. Does anybody wish to speak to that motion? Well, I certainly wish to speak to that motion. And I speak in favor of the motion with the hope and, in fact, with the expectation that it will be received by the provincial government with the same spirit of support, collaboration, and alignment, which has so, I think, favorably marked our relationship with the province since the beginning of this emergency. Even before the Jasper wildfire complex, Jasper faced, as Deputy Mayor DeMota indicated, the unique fiscal challenges due to a very small tax base supporting a very large visitor base. We saw, for example, even at the time of evacuation, that 4 times as many visitors were evacuated safely from the community as there are residents. And that small residential base has historically supported that very large visitor base. If we think of all the parking that we require and an upscaled wastewater treatment plant that, to be somewhat base, handles the flushes of 25,000 people on the tax base of 5,000 people. In economic terms, as Councillor or Deputy Mayor DeMota indicated, it's almost a third of our expenditures are focused on supporting visitor-facing services and infrastructure to the tune of about $6 million annually. And the impact on our tax base from these wildfires has been significant. Almost 30% of our structures, translating to almost $300 million in property tax assessment, including, though, other revenue losses, transit, parking, and utilities, all significant losses. And as I said, the diminishment of income-based non-residential assessment is yet to be determined, but we will see that in coming years. So without financial support from other levels of government in the province in particular, our community will face insurmountable challenges and extremely difficult decisions which will impact our residents and service levels and ultimately impact our tourism-based economy. And so I support this motion, but recognizing that in essence, we are not seeking a grant or a subsidy from the province. I see this as an investment by the province in our tourism economy. The province continues to have an ambitious strategy of its own to grow tourism from about a $10 billion economy to $25 billion. Jasper is recognized as one of the legacy destinations. We contribute disproportionately to the provincial GDP recognized through tourism. And so, yes, we absolutely need this for our community, but the province can see this as an investment in its own future by supporting our tourism-based community. So I thank Councillor Wilson for the motion, and I will fully support it and continue to advocate to the province that we will need this support and recognition as a tourism-based destination as we are, and that we will continue to need funding to support our important role in the provincial economy. Deputy Mayor DeMota.
Eloquent words, Mayor Ireland, and I don't think anybody could say it better than that. And I thank you for recognizing all that you said. And when you look at the province's goal for their revenue targets when it comes to tourism, and Jasper being one of the legacy properties, you look at the overall revenue for the province, that does signify a huge shift in understanding that and acceptance that tourism is a high revenue generating opportunity for the province. And I'm glad that we're working towards that recognition at that higher level, because it is significant. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor DeMota. If there are no others who wish to speak to the series of motions, well, the one motion with three parts, I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Thank you all, and thank you to administration for your work in bringing this forward to council at what are still early days responding to this ongoing emergency. Councillors, that takes us to the next agenda item, 6.2. At this point, does any councillor require a slight break? Deputy Mayor DeMota?
I was going to ask for 10 minutes.
All right, I see some other nods. I have 10:48. Let's round up for a change, and we will reconvene at 11 o'clock. And I will call recess until then, which is appropriate since it's the first day in school. So we will enjoy our own recess. Thank you. We have all returned. I will call us back to session. We are at agenda item 6.2, council remuneration post the 2025 election. We have a report from administration. Mr. Given, go ahead.
Thanks very much, Your Worship. Yes, and I just want to reiterate this causes some consternation, certainly in the public, whenever elected official remuneration is discussed. And I want to be explicitly clear that the recommendations contained in this report are intended to be implemented following the 2025 election. So council, maybe similar to the discussion before, Your Worship, around property tax waiver, this council is discussing something that will not impact any of you that are elected today. Any changes, if council recommends or supports any changes, would only be applied to the new council following the 2025 election. So I think it's just important that council and the public appreciate that from the very beginning of the introduction of the report. So administration is recommending that council make this report and its recommendations available for public feedback, and that council direct administration to return after that public feedback on the item has been collected to a future council meeting. So in essence, what we're here today to do is to recommend something to you, start the public discussion, then begin a process of gathering public input so that you can hear that public input before making a decision. And the reason that administration is recommending this approach is to find an appropriate balance between acting quickly and in the context where council has set regular council meetings and eliminated committee meetings, and to strike that balance of acting quickly with ensuring that there's good public awareness about this issue and that the public has a reasonable opportunity to provide comment. So as council knows, there is a municipal election just over a year away. The next election will be held in October of 2025. In advance of that election, candidates may begin to submit their nomination papers to seek a spot on Jasper on council starting January 1st of 2025. So while the election is just over a year away, people could start to actively campaign or submit their nomination papers in just a few months. The last external review of council pay took place in 2017, which is obviously some time ago. And at the July 16th council meeting, just before the wildfire and evacuation, council had approved the establishment of an external council remuneration review committee, which was intended to include public members. Obviously, due to the evacuation and the subsequent impact on our community, administration felt that it might be worthwhile to recommend alternative approaches to council. The public are obviously focused on a number of different issues impacting their personal and professional lives, and administration felt it was perhaps appropriate to undertake an administrative review and make recommendations to council, while still, again, providing that opportunity for the public to provide input before council makes a final decision. So with the support of the Alberta Municipal Clerks Association, administration has gathered council remuneration information from a variety of different communities, which you'll see in the attached schedule in the report. And administration is essentially following a few principles in making our recommendation. First, the remuneration for people who choose to seek elected office must be fair and reasonable. The remuneration shouldn't be a barrier to diverse representation, and meaning that people from all different backgrounds should be able to serve on council, knowing that they will be compensated fairly. Compensation that is too low would limit the potential pool of candidates to those who would have the financial means to make to make that change to their lives, which I'm sure all of the current council members can speak about the impact of council on your ability to operate other businesses or jobs. And thirdly, the remuneration must recognize the inherent complexity, responsibilities, and time commitments associated with the role of elected officials in the municipality of Jasper. And I'm making that point because the role of elected officials in Jasper has always been somewhat different from those of other similar sized Alberta communities as a result of our tourism-based economy, which council knows well, and also the complexity of intergovernmental relations. For the upcoming term, we're also going to add the complexities related to wildfire recovery to that. And so those first two principles, I think, could be applied in any community. You'd want to ensure that elected officials are compensated fairly and reasonably, and that elected official compensation isn't a barrier to diverse people seeking to put their name forward for office. These final points, though, I think are specific to Jasper. Jasper is in a unique context, both generally because of our location, but also specifically because of the wildfire and the complex needs of the community over the coming years. So with those principles in mind, administration is essentially recommending two significant changes to council remuneration for the next term. Those are one, essentially eliminating per diems. The current council compensation structure works on essentially a base salary for elected officials, and then enabling elected officials to claim a per diem or a payment for attending meetings and events as a part of their official council duties. And that per diem is variable depending on the appointments of the council member and their responsibilities. And so it could vary from council member to council member. So administration is recommending eliminating the per diem and essentially increasing the base salary for council members to simplify the compensation structure and ensure consistency in remuneration across the elected officials. It's also our view that this increases transparency for the public and potential candidates. Under the current system, if somebody is considering running for council and they look up how much council members are paid, under the current policy, they would see the base salary, which does not reflect what the actual final compensation is after the course of the year, recognizing that variable per diem amount. And so this change would again reduce the complexity associated with having for council members to have to submit per diem claims, administration having to process them, and doing that for all 7 members of council. And it would also allow the public to understand what the compensation, clearly understand what the compensation is for elected officials in our community. The second major change would be adjusting CPI only once during the term. So again, recognizing that this change of eliminating the per diem structure and moving to a base salary, administration believes that it would be appropriate to adjust to CPI only once during the term. So essentially saying that we wouldn't annually increase the council salary, it would only be once during the term. And it is important, while administration is recommending reducing that to only once every 2 years, it is important that council salaries keep pace with inflation as it is out in the regular economy. But administration believes that sort of moderation in recognition of sort of the larger changes that are being recommended is reasonable. You'll see in the report that there are a few other more minor changes that are being recommended, particularly with the role of mayor, formalizing the mayor's allowance for phone and telephone service, recognizing the mayor has to take a lot of calls and that additional expense currently falls under the mayor personally. And there is an expectation, I think, from the public that a lot of business will be dealt by phone. Secondly, recognizing the mayor's role as being a full-time role, which we can certainly ask the incumbent. But I think the public's expectation is that the role of mayor is something that a candidate should be able to give their full time and attention to. And then you'll see a representation of the average salaries of Alberta mountain towns, which administration used as a bit of a guide point. I would also just point out the numbers that are represented in the report of just over 99,000 for the mayor is an average of Canmore, Banff, and Jasper's current salary, which brings the average down. If we looked at just the average salaries of Canmore and Banff, the salaries for mayor are over $100,000 at $108,000 per year if we took the average of our 2 comparator communities there. And it should be noted that in Banff, Banff does have a per diem system on top of their higher salary. So their mayor is paid more than here in Jasper and can also claim per diems. Our administration's recommendation is to adopt this no per diem approach for the position of mayor and have an all-encompassing salary of $114,417. With respect to councillors, again, just to look at the sort of comparators of our Alberta mountain towns who also have the impacts of a tourism-based economy, and certainly in the case of Banff, have the impact of that intergovernmental complexity, neither of which are dealing with the same situation that Jasper will be with recovery. Administration is recommending an increase to an all-encompassing salary for councillors to just over $36,000. And again, to be clear, the average that's shown in the report is the average of Banff, Canmore, and Jasper's current salary. If we eliminated Jasper's current salary from that average, you would see the other two towns average out at about $33,000 a year, both of which also have per diems, which means that councillors there, well, they would have an average salary of $33,000. They can also claim per diems on top of that $33,000. So I provide that just for a little bit of context, because the $36,000 change, so sorry, $36,000 for councillors and the 114 for mayor obviously seem like large changes. They are very much in line with the averages of two very comparable communities who are not facing recovery from a disaster situation. And administration's recommendation here removes that additional variability that comes from the per diems, which are still at play in some of the other communities. So, Your Worship, I'm happy to answer any questions. I would note that the total cost of the proposed increases is just over $91,000 a year. And so it is an increase, absolutely, to be clear. It is, I think, overall a very minor increase. That $91,000, of course, would be split across the 7 different positions. And in summary, administration is making this recommendation to reflect both the inherent complexity for elected officials in the 2025 to 2029 term as a result of Jasper's location within a national park, our tourism-based economy, and also wildfire recovery that will be a focus of the next term. Administration is hoping to increase the transparency for the general public so they can more clearly understand how much council is paid, and to increase understanding for candidates who right now might be considering whether they would wish to put their name stand for council. Providing clear numbers on council remuneration would allow people to make informed choices about whether they choose to get involved in the democratic process in our community. Your Worship, I'm happy to answer any questions. Again, the recommendation from administration is not that council approve this change today, but that council essentially make this report and its recommendations available for public feedback, and then administration come back with a summary of that public feedback before you make the decisions. And finally, of course, just that reminder that all recommendations here are intended and would only be implemented following the 2025 election in October of next year for the new council.
Thank you, CAO Given. I will turn to councillors for questions, beginning with Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, CEO Mr. Given. In the first recommendation, we make a comment about public feedback. And in the document, I was scouring, looking for what is acceptable public feedback. In other words, how can people communicate to the municipality their feedback? I'm concerned that we'll see a lot of activity on social media by a variety of positive, negative, whatever, and different comments. But what are we going to be considering as the appropriate public feedback mechanism? Because I think it's critical that everybody work on the same platform to provide feedback, because people may say they provided feedback, but it was never considered.
Your Worship, for Councillor Melnick, a very important question. Obviously, given the nature of the variety of forms that council will receive feedback in, administration's intention here is to have a formalized public input process using our Engage Jasper platform. So we have a platform that where we can ask specific questions and where we would gather the same kind of consistent information. Administration would intend to use that Engage Jasper platform to provide the report and all of the associated materials, so people could be forming informed opinions based on the data that's being presented to council. And then we would ask a set of specific questions to ensure that we could present council with sort of a summary of how people responded to specific questions, not just people's open-ended answers about their feelings about this, but specific questions that we would ask them about the level of their perceived level of appropriateness, And I think an important question that I would like to ask the public is whether they would be willing to do the job of council for the current and proposed rates of pay.
If I may, Your Worship.
Yeah.
We are, one thing in the council remuneration is we are specifically looking at rates of pay, which is great, but to the point of opening and making available the opportunity to run for council, we may be unique, or not necessarily unique, but we are one of the lead communities in the province that cover child care expenses. So if you are an individual who has to worry about childcare and do not want to run for council because you're concerned that you have to worry about taking care of your children, as a council last term, we decided that it was appropriate that that is a claimable expense to broaden the pool of individuals who can run for council. And I think it's important that in our website, when we do post the opportunity, that computer access is provided for, as well as a robust dental and medical plan. And those things, in addition to a salary, might encourage more individuals to look at putting their name forward to run for council.
Thank you, Councillor Melnick, Councillor Kelleher-Enthi, and then Councillor Waxer.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. To you, to Mr. Given. Just on the salaries, they're based around Canmore and Banff, but Canmore and Banff are double our size, and their tax base is much larger. In the past, we've always looked at the salaries compared with communities our size. I'm just wondering why we're so close that we're looking at Canmore Banff only.
Your Worship, so certainly administration presented information from a variety of different communities. And so it's there in the table, the public and council can see and decide in your own mind which might be an appropriate type of community. We understand just how big an impact Jasper's unique context has. I mean, really, if we want to say on the basis of complexity, who is as complex as Jasper at a governance level, it's only Banff. If we want to say who is economically similar to Jasper in Alberta, it's only Banff and Canmore. If we wanted to say who is the same size as Jasper, well, that's an entirely different question. And I think we recognize that in all other areas of municipal service, a municipality of approximately 5,000 regular population doesn't need to provide anywhere near the level of services that Jasper's called on to provide. And so that's why, for those reasons, that governance complexity and that visitor-based economy, administration's recommending that our comparators are our Alberta comparators are Canmore and Banff. We certainly didn't go further afield. I think in the past, Whistler and others might have been considered. But certainly in Alberta, there really are only two comparable communities when it comes to the level of complexity and governance responsibilities that council members in Jasper are asked to participate in. The other thing that I would say is that it's really important to recognize, even comparing to Canmore and Banff, both of those communities still maintain some level of per diems. So when we look at the total pay for Banff, the mayor's annual salary in Banff is $101,000 currently. That the mayor can also claim per diems on top of that salary. So it's very likely that you would find that their total annual compensation is much higher than $101,000. The town of Canmore has chosen to eliminate per diems for the mayor position, and you'll see that the mayor's salary in Canmore is $114,973. So again, an example of a community where they've removed those per diems and you see a higher salary. It should be noted that the Canmore councillors also are eligible for per diems, even though their salary is just under $33,000 a year. So Canmore and Banff are the most similar to Jasper. And even with the recommendations here, the Jasper salary and the total pay for council in the next term will likely be less than what is being paid in the other communities as a result of the other communities maintaining a per diem system.
Thank you for the explanation, Mr. Given.
Councillor Waxer, and then Deputy Mayor Demota.
I would just like to focus my comments on the second of the following of the principles that were used in the discussions, and that is the remuneration must not be a barrier to a diverse and representative pool of candidates from Jasper residents. I think that's absolutely critical to understand when we're talking about council remuneration. It's very, very critical that, and maybe particularly more so now with given the situation we're in, that a diverse group of people, not just those who could afford to participate at the council table. So I very much support the recommendations because I really believe that it's critical that we compensate those who choose to put their name forward, and that we provide the opportunity for those who may need that compensation in terms of their household income. And my other comment was, I wondered whether it was would be important in the future to have included that under inclusion considerations, because that would be a really excellent opportunity under inclusion considerations to highlight the fact that being a town councillor requires, a municipal councillor requires a significant investment in time, and that someone who needs to spend most of their time earning an income might be precluded from being in that at that table, but yet their voice could be very important. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Waxer. Deputy Mayor Demota.
Well, I appreciate all the work that's been done, and I think that the table that we have in front of us represents a pretty good scope of the consideration that we need to take here. To echo Councillor Melnick's position on childcare, I think that that opportunity should be explored and be part of the next part of council remuneration. It's worked to help people out in the past, and I think to broaden the demographic availability for potential candidates would get a better response for sure. Now, as far as having some experience, particularly being on regional boards and working with people that are still employed and people that are retired, I'm more in favor for the per diem aspect of the construct. I know it's a little bit more of a burden administratively. However, just in some discussions when other communities have been talking to us, when I've been in regional conversations, that some of those all-inclusive packages often deter councillors' commitments to different boards and making meetings and things like that. And I think that the per diems offer an incentive for people to attend. And I know it's a bit of a financial one, but I think that you're compensated for the work that you do. We do have people that are available a little bit more and have more cumbersome commitments to different committees and can make themselves available because of that free time. And there are other people that may be working that want to be councillors and contribute to the community that way, that might have a little bit of a busier workload when it comes to their professional lives. So I think that having that spread out and councillors' commitments and having that variability, I think, is really important. So I don't support an all-inclusive aspect and the removal of the per diem approach at this point.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Demota. Just a reminder, we are only at this stage looking at directing administration to make it public. So those comments would be again, appropriate when the matter comes for debate among council, but I'm not saying you shouldn't say them. Just remember them for a future date when we have to vote on this. Paul.
If I may follow up on that, I appreciate that. But we are going to public consultation, and those are things that I think should be in the minds of people when they're giving us input back. And, you know, if other councillors can share their experience, just so that people have an understanding of what's actually going on, I think is important. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland, and thank you, CAO Given, for explaining that this is for next term, not for this term. I did see some confusion on social media channels around that, and I'm very happy you've cleared that up. I also agree that remuneration should not be a barrier to who wants to run. Even I look around this table, and unless you're retired, you're working another full-time job. And next term is going to be extremely challenging. We're going to need a very focused group of individuals on council.
Any other questions for Mr. Given? Before I invite a motion, then I have a question for administration and Mr. Given, and that is simply with respect to the dates that are embedded in the recommendation, and whether there is a need for those returns. So September 27th for public feedback and a decision on October 8th. In mid-July, we had intended to strike a citizens committee to review this. Because of the wildfire, we changed that approach in August and are now looking for a recommendation, which we have from administration, which is subject to public feedback. But I wonder whether we might broaden the time for public feedback, potentially to October 8th, with a decision on October 22nd, just to give the public additional time to consider what is before us and provide their feedback. A 10-day window seems to me perhaps a bit short, but there might be some administrative necessity to get this done by October 8th. So if you could speak to that, please, Mr. Given.
Certainly, Your Worship. We're happy to take Council's guidance on the amount of time for public feedback. I think the only thing that we would say is that having a little bit of time between the close of public feedback to allow administration to summarize it and then write up a report with recommendations to council, that would be about the only barrier. We're certainly happy to follow council's direction on how long this should be open, keeping in mind there was an original intent from council to administration to turn this around by a certain time to enable members of the public who might be considering running for council to make their decisions in advance of the nominating deadline. Or sorry, the open of nomination period. Recognizing that that isn't until January, the dates that you're proposing of coming back to council, October 22nd, would seem, to provide still a fair amount of time for members of the public to consider and potential candidates. But really, we leave that to council, just with that administrative sort of need to be able to have some time following the close of the public input to be able to gather that information and write it up for council.
Thank you for that. Is there a councillor prepared to make a motion with respect to these matters? Councillor Wilson?
Sure. I would make the motion that council direct administration to make the report and recommendations available for public feedback until October 22nd was the October 4th?
8th. The 8th.
October 8th, thank you for that. And that council direct administration to return to the October 22nd council meeting with this report and a summary of public input.
Thank you for that motion, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Melnick, I saw your hand up first, but maybe that was to make the motion. You waved it off. Deputy Mayor Demota.
Thank you. Just in the table there, we have our current council remuneration salary just over 19,000. I'm wondering if we have an average number. I guess we can go and look up at the financial audit on what that means overall average per councillor with the per diems in there, because I think that's important too, just to have that number available so people can see the difference. And again, if you go and look at the financial reports from last year, you'll see that every councillor varies in number, but it'd be nice to have a number that's kind of like our average right now.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Demota. Councillor Melnick?
To Deputy Mayor Demota's point, the spread in the financials on page 34, which are on our website, of last year's audited financial statements show about a $6,000 spread between the highest paid councillor and the lowest paid councillor. And that reflects what Councillor Demota, or Deputy Mayor Demota reflected, is that some councillors have more out-of-town responsibilities, given their roles, which could potentially change any year after the organizational meeting. So while it may on some years look that some councillors are high, depending on their responsibilities and commitments, they may actually end up being low in the last 2 years of their term. So it's interesting when you're looking at a snapshot of a financial, for example, for 2023 and 2022, but it may not reflect the reality of 2024 and 2025 of what remuneration would happen. I personally want to speak in favor of the motion, in that moving to have the public give us feedback on moving away from per diems will probably make it a lot easier for administration, and also gives a clear indication to anyone running or potentially thinking of running what the reality is of the role. I think one thing that we should do, of course, is also indicate that there's a certain commitment, which is getting a little ahead of ourselves right now, that individuals who want to consider running, there is a certain time commitment that people need to be willing to commit to. And that's how they can evaluate the role of councillor given the salary that is being proposed.
Thank you, Councillor Melnick. Any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? If not, I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. So thank you, Mr. Given, for the report and the recommendation, which will now be available for public feedback until October 8th, and come back to council with a summary of that feedback and for decision by council on October 22nd. Deputy Mayor Demota.
Yeah, thank you very much. I just wanted to make a comment because I know I've received some feedback on, why would you be talking about these things at this time when there's so many other things going on, and focusing on our energy here. I just want to say that it's going to be a complex time for the next council. This does have budgetary impacts, and in order to set the next council up for success, it's important to have these conversations now, particularly when we have to make other items available for a budget discussion. So I don't want to call it a low-hanging fruit, but when we have opportunities to take care of when there are bigger, more complex issues on the horizon, I'm glad that this is here in front of us, and I think it's important for people to understand why, and again, to get it out there for people that are considering running for council in the next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Demota. It is part of our job to ensure that a salary is set for incoming council, and that job doesn't disappear regardless of a fight. That takes us to agenda item 6.3, appointments to Jasper Recovery Advisory Committee. That was deferred after our last meeting. There is still, I think, some potential for adjustments to the membership of the advisory committee. I know that we have received, and it's not on the agenda, but I think councillors received an email correspondence yesterday suggesting that there should be a representative of the faith community on the advisory committee. Whether council wishes to amend it or not, it's up to council. We have heard from the Jasper Park Chamber of Commerce that they will willingly take the position that has been added for them. I am not sure whether administration or others have heard from any other of the proposed membership groups for the advisory committee. And so before council makes appointments, it would be nice to know that the community representatives have agreed to take the positions that we have allotted to them. Deputy Mayor Demota.
Yeah, I want a better understanding of the process, if I may, through your worship, to administration. When we made those decisions for the additions last week, referring to Community Futures and the Employment and Education Center representative, have we reached out with a request? And is that like the obligation of administration once those appointments have been made by council?
Your worship, for Councillor Demota, so council, remember that those changes were made by council at the table. And so administration hadn't done any pre-work with any of those organizations prior to the discussion at the last council meeting. I think administration, those organizations are likely aware, but administration hasn't taken any active steps to seek their appointments. We would first, I think the intention of this today is to see whether council is in a position to appoint members of council to fill those council spots. And then we would follow up with the other organizations to seek their members.
And understanding that we did get a request from the faith community having a representative there, I just wanted to make sure that if we were going to make appointments to for other agencies, that they're willing to accept that. They might not have the ability to do so. However, I think it is important to ask, and I'm glad that we have that clarification.
Councillor Keller-Hrampe.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. To you, to Mr. Given. Two members from Jasper, two members at large, how will they be selected?
Your worship, for Councillor Keller-Hrampe, our typical approach is that administration would put forward to the public an opportunity to submit their interest. As we do with all of our other committees, we would bring forward those names to council, and in an in-camera session, council would be able to review the names and then make a recommendation for appointment.
Any other comments with respect to this agenda item? Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Your Worship. Looking through the criteria and terms of reference, I don't see how a chair is selected or how our vice chair is selected or appointed. And perhaps we should add that to purpose and responsibilities in maybe 1.6, that the committee at the first meeting shall determine who will be chair and vice chair by a vote of the majority. I just see that that's the one thing that's lacking in how this committee will get organized from the very start.
Thank you for that. Councillor Melnick. Do you wish to make a motion to amend the terms of reference to add that wording as 1.6 that you suggested? That is that upon its first meeting, the members shall select among themselves a chair and vice chair.
I can make that motion. Thank you.
Thank you for that. First, that is a motion. I will look for debate. I saw your hand earlier, Councillor Wilson, but unless it's with respect to this motion, I will come back to you. But if it is with respect to this motion, go ahead.
No, I didn't have my hand up. Thanks.
Oh, I'm sorry. I mixed up the boxes I was looking at. Councillor Hall, I'm sorry.
Not to do with this motion, but I would like the opportunity to speak after this motion.
Yes, thank you. Deputy Mayor Demota, did you want to speak to the motion?
No, thanks. I had a question, but I think I just answered it myself. Thanks.
All right, the motion is to amend the terms of reference for the Recovery Advisory Committee by adding another subparagraph numbered 1.6, indicating that upon its first meeting, the membership would select by majority of vote a chair and vice chair of the advisory committee. If there is no debate, I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed, so the terms of reference are thus amended. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. I did want to speak to, I know it wasn't a public letter, but the letter we received that was quite beautifully written. And when I look at purpose and responsibilities of the committee, the first line is to address the physical and mental health needs of our community. And I don't see anybody in the membership that might address mental health needs, maybe besides the 2 members of public or the 2 members of council. I wonder if that could be a conversation we have around potentially adding another member that's a bit more specific to the mental health needs of our community. I'm very concerned about our community. I know there are supports. I don't think there are enough. It's going to be a long road to recovery. There's just a blanket of grief. We've all experienced something very traumatic. It's unprecedented. I do think that we might be nice to have somebody on this committee that has knowledge and expertise in mental health supports.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. It was an issue that I raised a week ago as well, and Mr. Given responded, and it looks like he may be prepared to respond again, that the role of the committee is not necessarily to provide the activity, just as we may not have an engineer, but they might find expertise and opportunities and programs that could be made available to the community. So whether it is a person versed and qualified in providing mental health supports that's on the committee is perhaps not necessarily the question, but I will let Mr. Given refer to the remarks that he made in that regard a week ago.
Your Worship, certainly appreciate the opportunity, and hopefully Council appreciate that as we continue to build out our recovery structure, things are continuing to evolve. The intention of the Recovery Advisory Committee is to be just that, advisory at a high level to the Director of Recovery, and then what Council didn't know last week and what I wasn't able to share because it was still in development, and our Director of Recovery, Mr. Fark, has returned. Administration is also setting up a number of technical working groups to focus in on specific areas of recovery. And that's the level which we would start to see more technical expertise applied. There's going to be working groups around housing, social recovery, infrastructure, economic recovery, and overall rebuild. And at each of those working group tables is where we would have different subject matter experts at a high level We've already recognized that Alberta Health Services and Recovery Alberta would be important members in the social recovery working group. So that technical expertise would be there. The role of the I keep saying the Emergency Advisory Committee because we modeled this off of that existing structure. The Recovery Advisory Committee would be to review the recommendations and approach that the Jasper Recovery Center intends to take. Essentially review the recommendations and approach that are coming up from the working groups and the technical experts to assess whether, from a community perspective, directionally administration is headed the right way. So I just want to give everyone that confidence that administration also recognizes the need for diverse expertise. And the recommendation is that, that broad diverse expertise and all the different types of experts that we need are best accommodated at that working group level. Because otherwise we might face the challenge of the advisory committee saying, well, we should probably have school boards there. Well, we should probably have, and that list would naturally get larger and larger because recovery is so broad and there are so many important perspectives. The advisory committee is intended to provide that overarching community perspective. And the working groups are providing the technical horsepower to advise on appropriate approaches. So I just hope that that'll give council that level of comfort that the importance of mental health and well-being isn't, although it isn't reflected with a specific position at the advisory committee, it is reflected in the working group approach. And it just sort of would reference that administration's original recommendation on this was that the advisory committee was smaller and more community focused. It certainly has a focus of now in its current format has a focus of a number of different business interests and partners that I think take that economic focus. We also intend to include them in that working group level as well. So council can have that level of comfort. We're seeking broad community perspective and technical expertise at the right level, which would be through the working groups.
Thank you, CAO Given. Deputy Mayor Demota.
I'm just checking to see if this would be the appropriate time to make council appointments for the positions that are in terms of reference.
It certainly could be. We had 3 volunteers a week ago, and then one said that they would stand down. So if there are still 2, that would be convenient. I think that Councillor Melnick, had you indicated an interest, and Councillor, who was it, Keller-Empty? I can't recall.
Hall.
I'm sorry?
Councillor Hall.
And Councillor Waxer had initially indicated and then withdrawn, as I recall. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Demota.
Okay, well, I move that council appoint Councillor Hall and Councillor Melnick to the Recovery Advisory Committee.
Thank you for that. Is there any debate on that motion? Councillor Melnick?
Friendly amendment suggested is that an alternate be appointed as well, and that would be Councillor Waxer.
Yeah, I'm fine with that if that's the opinion of council and support council. Yeah, I think that's great, and I apologize for getting that. And not to add to the already cumbersome group, but just from being on another board and with Councillor Hall's attendance at that last 2 weeks ago, she made the point that it's important for alternates to be at meetings as well, so that in case that there's an issue for a vote and the appointed councillor can't be available, it's important for that alternate person to be up to speed. And I think the best way to do that is to have those people available. So I'm good with the friendly.
All right, so the motion as amended is to appoint Councillor Melnick and Councillor Hall as members of the Recovery Advisory Committee, with Councillor Waxer to serve as an alternate. There is no further debate. I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Thank you for that. That takes us to agenda item 6.4, Parcel CH access and Spruce Avenue Development Tender Award. And the Mr. Mann take it for my screen, so I presume that he is going to report on that. So go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. Councillors, pleased to overview the tender award recommendation and I'll overview both the scope of the work as well as recommendations for funding of the project. So the tender award is in two components. It includes providing access and services to the future RCMP site north of the Forest Park Hotel, as well as the two adjacent Parks Canada sites. This will involve connecting to sewer and water services that are just west of the railway and open cutting across Connaught Drive, and then extending those services and the roads to the parcel behind the future RCMP site. The second component is to extend Spruce Avenue south of Connaught Drive and provide access to the adjoining parcels, one of which will be the Jasper apartment site, and the other the Jasper Municipal Housing Corporation site that will provide, again, an increase in supply of higher density housing in the community. I should note that the RCMP future site has also been identified by the JRCC as a potential site for interim housing. So this tender, these two projects will facilitate the development of a large number of additional housing units in the community. So the recommendation is to award to the lowest evaluated tenderer, which was Jasper Concrete. The funding that's being recommended is that the RCMP site servicing be funded 1/3 by the RCMP. We have an agreement to that effect, with the remaining costs being funded from a local improvement levy to the other two lots, and that local improvement bylaw process be initiated. The Spruce Avenue extension project is proposed to be funded from the housing reserve for $220,000, as well as the financial stabilization reserve up to $90,000. I'm pleased to answer any questions that council may have at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Manns. Questions from councillors to administration? Deputy Mayor Demota.
Just on the tender award, was the lowest bid the primary qualifier, or you just have to be the lowest bidder amongst the companies that proposed?
The award is to the lowest evaluated tender, which also happens to be the lowest price tender. All three bids received were evaluated as complete.
Thank you for that, Councillor Wilson.
Just looking at the RCMP site access and servicing, the two lots that are labeled PC. Of course, they're still in the control of Parks Canada, but are both of those parcels reserve housing? Are they labeled as reserve housing currently?
I'll ask somebody to help me with that. I believe the parcel, at least to the west of the RCMP site, has been.
Your Worship, I'll step in to help out Director Manns. Yeah, the intention of the parcel to the west of the RCMP site is that it would be for future community housing. At this time, there hasn't been any determination made about the allocation of that, whether it would be to the municipality, to the Jasper Municipal Housing Corporation, or some other approach, but was intended for housing. The triangle-shaped parcel to the north was sort of future community use, but I don't believe it was specifically discussed as housing.
Go ahead, Councillor Wilson.
Okay, thank you for that. And just to follow up as well regarding the different funding structures between, RCMP is actually providing a third of the funding for the one parcel, yet the other one is, as I understand it, will be split between both parcels. Although one parcel is a fair amount larger, twice the size. Can you speak to that?
Go ahead, Baron.
Yeah, the local improvement, the basis for it is typically frontage. I'm not sure what other mechanisms currently exist for allocation of those remaining 2/3 costs between the two parcels.
Yeah, Your Worship, and Director Manns is exactly correct. So local improvement levies do work on a frontage basis. So although the triangle lot is larger, its frontage is roughly 50% of the total along that access road. Again, administration would work out the specific numbers of the local improvement levy and the sort of share and the proportions, and that would be presented to the the leaseholders, and would form a part of our public advertising, and ultimately the local improvement levy bylaw that would be brought forward to council. You'd see that specific breakdown.
Sorry, Mr. Given, just to clarify though, I think I was speaking more to the one along Connaught. So if JMHC would take over the remaining amount of that land reserve, because I think currently we have it just split, the local improvement levy would then be, most likely 50-50 between the JMHC and the Jasper apartments.
The funding recommendation for the Spruce Avenue extension, there wouldn't be any local improvement involved in that, and it would be funded by those two municipal reserves.
Okay, sorry for the confusion there. Yeah, I understand. And then I guess just to speak more to that, then the Jasper Apartments lot was, I think, sold as with the understanding that it was unserviced, but now the municipality is on the hook to servicing that lot. Sorry, Mr. Manns, you might not be able to speak to it, but this is a bit more historical.
Your Worship, if I may, and Baron may be able to also supplement. So the Jasper Apartments is also already subject to the local improvement levy that was imposed for the servicing of the lots with water, wastewater, and the other utilities in the 2022 project. So and they have also, through that local improvement levy, have essentially contributed to some of the costs. You'll see there's no cost to power because there was some prepayment of some of the power costs that were made. And so administration's view is that this is an equitable sharing in a way that will not impact the development costs for the JMHC affordable housing project.
Okay, thanks for that.
I wonder, Deputy Mayor Demota, if we may have lost Mayor Ireland. He's looking particularly contemplative.
All right. Okay. So does anybody have any more questions to ask? Is there a motion? Does somebody want to present a motion then? Councillor Wilson?
Sure.
Captain motion today?
I would make the motion that council award the parcel CH Access Road and Spruce Avenue Road Development tender to Jasper Concrete Limited in the amount of $1,227,229.75, excluding GST, as the lowest evaluated bidder. Also to direct administration to initiate a local improvement bylaw process to recover the servicing costs to the parcel CH Access Road from benefiting adjacent parcels, and that they fund the Spruce Avenue Road development from the housing reserve to $220,000, and then the financial stabilization reserve at $90,000.
Like to take back the chair, Your Worship. Councillor motion. Okay, so Councillor Wilson has made the motion. Is there any debate or further questions for clarity on the motion? Okay, if everybody understands, I'll call it to question. All in favor? Okay. There is none opposed. That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Your Worship, back to you. Audio, sir. Your audio is off still. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry for that absence. I'm not sure what happened to my internet connection. That takes us to agenda item 6.5, which was added at the request of Councillor Melnick, and I think the order he went in was transit first. But whatever, whether it was transit or National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, whatever your recollection serves, Councillor Melnick, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. And today is day one of students returning to school. And I saw that we had opened up the red zone in the west end of town to allow the opportunity for the school pickup, and positive to see that. The recovery transit schedule was posted, I believe, over the weekend, and I'm interested in the rationale that administration could provide for the choice of this particular schedule. And I bring it up in council because my concern is we're sending buses where they may not be needed, and we're ignoring the community, the town, where perhaps there are people without vehicles where we could provide a service. Personally, I was up on the bench in the Pyramid area for the last 12 days. There is no activity up there, and you cannot rent a boat. The resort is closed, Pyramid Lake Resort. There will be no skating until December. The resort itself is a construction site. So to have a bus go up there 5 days to a beach that, you know, we're now in September, I question why that would be part of the schedule. I understand the lodge is a partner there's a substantial number of people living out there. And we have 7 different routes to the lodge throughout the day. They're not open yet. There may be residents living out there. And we have 1 route within town at the end of the day to pick up people and move people around town. And I'm curious as to the rationale of why we introduced this particular schedule at this time when we could have done a much better job, I think, of servicing the town, and we quite honestly do not need to be up at Pyramid. So that's why I bring this to council, to see the rationale. Numbers from prior to the fire for ridership mean nothing anymore. And I would like to have us have an opportunity to suggest that perhaps the schedule should be taken back to administration to rethink who are we servicing.
Thank you, Councillor Melnick. I will look for Mr. Given perhaps to respond on behalf of administration if he can. If there's somebody else better suited, that's certainly permissible, just with respect to the rationale supporting that decision making, Mr. Given.
Your Worship, first, appreciate Council raising this. Hopefully Council appreciate that this is a question off the cuff. And given a heads up, we might like to provide more information to Council rather than just a verbal off the cuff response. But given that we're here today, I certainly want to be able to provide a response for you. Administration has acted with the support of with the support of a contractor over the last little while. We essentially farmed out the restart of the transit system because, as Council knows, our acting transit lead was Mr. Michaud, who is otherwise involved in utility matters. So with the support of external resources, we're able to come up pretty rapidly with a restart. I would have to check a little bit more about the specific details of why they made the decisions they did, but I think Councillor Melnick, you hit on some of them. Certainly, Jasper Park Lodge is remote outside of the town site and does have a significant number of residents who live on property and are currently living on property. I know the school bus was picking up students from their families to bring them in today. And we want to ensure that those residents have a good connection to the town site. The Pyramid Loop is a little bit different. It is actually one of the only recreation areas at this time that are actually opened by parks for general public access. And so in terms of supporting both visitors in getting to areas that are opened by parks for recreating and residents for being able to have access to those recreation areas, I think that probably was a part of the justification. The other thing that I'll say is that in our introduction of this recovery schedule, and we called it that way because we recognize that things are going to be very fluid. We imagine that this will operate for the next number of months, and we'll seek to make adjustments based on what we see from utilization and also how the visitor traffic returns. The other thing that Council should know is that we are separately discussing what role transit might play in overall recovery. We know that there are some, we discussed already today, some potential temporary housing sites. And there may be other, we also know that there are Jasperites who are living outside of Jasper and Hinton. And so administration is trying to bring together all of these different discussions and figure out how we can restart this public service rapidly with a schedule, while not sort of feeling like we're locked into that schedule for the next number of months. So as with last year, administration wanted to be able to start to be able to serve the public as quickly as possible. And we're ensuring that transit riders understand that adjustments to the system and schedule may be necessary over the next number of months. So for an off-the-cuff response, that's what I would have. Certainly serving the lodge because there's a large number of residents who are living outside the town site, serving the Pyramid area because it's one of the few recreation areas that is broadly open under the current park closures. And administration is seeking opportunities to increase transit service within the town site and potentially intercity between Hinton and Jasper going forward. When we would have more information, we would adjust the schedule and we would come to council with proposals on those items and seek to adjust the schedule. All of this being very fluid, recognizing that the community is undergoing a lot of changes.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Any follow-up, Councillor Melnick?
recognizing that I brought this up today, and this has only been in the public realm for about 72 hours. I would like to hear from other councillors, because just because we did something yesterday doesn't mean it's right today. And I seriously think in our limited resources that this is one of those opportunities where we can serve the individuals that need to be served, i.e. potentially the lodge. There are no customers up at Pyramid, and yes, it's an open area, but anyone who's come to Jasper at this point has a vehicle. They're not arriving by bus. They're not arriving by train. They've come here because they've chosen to. And if they wish to go to Pyramid, they can. Yes, there are those individuals in Jasper who could choose to go to Pyramid, who are residents, and the bus service could help. But I see a far greater need within the community to have a bus service than 5 times a day up to Pyramid. And the point is, we need to be making the right decisions given what's going on in our community at this point. And I appreciate, Mr. Given, an opportunity for you to go back to administration to reevaluate. This was, yes, off the cuff, an opportunity to bring this up for further review, given the comments from other councillors.
Thank you, Councillor Melnick. Deputy Mayor Demota.
Well, and when Councillor Melnick was initially pointing out the route, I was contemplating that, and I was quite satisfied with most of what CAO Given was able to give us as far as information goes. Now, I want people to consider the fact that we just came out of state of a local emergency on Sunday, in efforts to maybe promote a little bit more tourism while we have some time here. And I can't say that everybody coming here has a car. Some people that come in vehicles may not be the sole controller of that vehicle. There are tour buses that are coming into town, and there are people at leisure. Just because there's beaches up there doesn't mean that people will only be going up there for the beach, and understanding that, the resort is closed up there. It does give up people opportunity that might have accessibility issues, or just, not able to hike up there or ride their bikes. I think at this time, in solidarity with, bringing people back as visitors to the community, and with other businesses opening up, there are people that are residing and coming back to reside that have housing here that are going to be working and may not have vehicles. And I think, again, using the word solidarity with, Tourism Jasper and the Chamber and Parks Canada and the residents of this community, just to have that opportunity to maybe take advantage of some of that fortunate green space that's still available to use. I'd like to see what some of the ridership there is. I do, support maybe scaling some of this stuff back in some areas. But I think it's important to see what some of the ridership might be as we're reopening and recovering here. And just to completely, talk about shutting it down to those other locations, I don't think that would be serving, kind of our mandate and what we've done in support of the overall recovery. That's just my opinion.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Demota. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. I also support looking at numbers over the next few weeks, but with the Pyramid Bench being our only open forested trail area, I think it's important that we have some access for residents who don't have vehicles, or like Deputy Mayor Demota was saying, visitors that come in that might not have the vehicle for the afternoon. With the consideration that is our only, at this point, open trail system. I support a bus going up there, but I do support looking at numbers as well.
Thank you for that. Not speaking for administration, but I think they've heard the expression of interest and concern over busing schedules, and I'm sure that we will hear more from administration, which is not so much off the cuff, but they can reevaluate what the offering is and what it could be. I would invite us, unless there are other comments with respect to that, to turn to agenda item 6.6. Also, your requested addition, Councillor Melnick, and that relates to September 30th, National Day for Truth and Reconciliation.
Thank you, Your Worship. I appreciate that, and thank you for the commentary regarding the last topic. Looking forward to September 30th, it is a national holiday. It is a day that was declared by the federal government. I'm curious as to, has there been any communication between administration and Parks Canada as to how this year we might recognize that particular day? When it comes to the point on the agenda, I will add it to the upcoming events, but I think it was appropriate to bring it up here as to whatever plans may be in the works at this point, for us to be able to communicate to the public so that they can participate on that particular day. The second item I brought up is, as it is a national holiday, that will mean the closure of probably the daycare and maybe other municipal services. And we should have that on our website earlier rather than later, if in fact we are going to do what we have in the past, as recognizing that as a national holiday.
Thank you, Councillor Melnick. Mr. Given.
Your Worship, for Councillor Melnick, maybe I'll just start at the back end of that comment. First, with respect to municipal services, at this time we don't have a lot of municipal services open, and so there's not a lot to be closed. The daycare would likely communicate directly with their families as they've done in the past, and so while I don't have specific information about that, I have no doubt that Ms. Daniel would be undertaking that. We have obligations under our collective agreement with the union around closures. Our daycare staff are unionized staff, and so they would fall under that, and they would get that day. And I have no doubt that Ms. Daniel, the child care services manager, would be on top of that and in direct communication with families. With respect to the observance of the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, administration has been in contact with Parks. Typically, we would plan an observance and bring people and Indigenous partners into Jasper. Given the housing constraints and the situation, that's not in the cards this year. We already have begun, and you may have seen on our social media channels, communicating weekly about reconciliation with our calendar of reconciliation options and opportunities for the public to turn one day of recognition and what is now a national holiday into a month-long opportunity to think more deeply about how we might move forward along the path of reconciliation. So administration has already started that action. Even though there is no particular sort of event or observance planned for the day in Jasper. Administration is working closely with the schools and local knowledge keepers and Indigenous residents to inform our approach. And we have also been in contact with Parks, who are also of the mind that there won't be a large celebration or observance of the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation in Jasper this year. We're going to be looking for other opportunities to continue along that path and increase public knowledge, and those efforts have already started.
Thank you, Mr. Given. That then takes us to agenda item 7, notices of motion, of which there are none. So we can dispose of that. Move to agenda item 8, councillor reports. Are there any reports from individual councillors to council as a whole? Councillor Waxer.
Yes, I had the opportunity on Saturday evening to attend a fundraiser in the city of Toronto, and I just wanted to share with publicly the level of support that was demonstrated at that event was absolutely exceptional. I guess I need to go back to say that I was already in Toronto for a family event, and so I attended while I was there. it was an absolutely packed room with an unbelievable slate of silent auction items, and there was a huge number of young people, all of whom had previous experience having worked in Jasper. I heard over and over again how people attributed much of their education in becoming a young adult, and that all the learnings that came from being in Jasper, also the expression of the fact that many people indicated from old to young that they had met their spouse while working in Jasper. So there was just an absolute outpouring of warmth and appreciation for all that Jasper offers. It was truly a heartwarming experience. I also heard from someone at that event who does marketing for one of the larger hotel people, and had expressed an uptick, in fact, of interest in coming to Jasper, and wanting from clients who were very anxious to support the local economy. So that was also very cheering news. So that's all I wanted to say on that, but just to that all of us, every resident, and could feel the love coming from that event. It would be amazing. I also wanted to speak that the Hakone committee met last week, and it was determined that this would not be the appropriate time to have taxpayer dollars used to support this initiative and this relationship. But that being recognized, that the relationship is important, and there is a 50-year period of time that this relationship has been in existence. I wanted to acknowledge that Councillor Kelleher MP has agreed to act as a delegate on behalf of Jasper, but at no cost but entirely on her own cost, and that she will be joined by 5 other local residents who will also attend and form a delegation representing the community of Jasper. And that is all the updates I have for today, unless Councillor Kelleher MP would want to add to that.
Thank you, Councillor Waxer. Go ahead, Councillor Kelleher MP.
Thank you, Councillor Waxer. Yes, I'm deeply honoured to represent Jasper. I will have to lean on Mayor Ireland to help me prepare the speech for the event, and I look forward to representing Jasper there. And I think it's important for our history going back of the 50 years, as we were the sister city in with Hakone before Alberta even became a twin province. So I think it's very important, and I think, you know, we'll have to send the message that they'll be welcome to come here for celebrate even a bigger celebration for the 55th anniversary.
Thank you both, and thank you, Councillor Kelleher MP, for taking on that duty at your own cost. Very much appreciated, and extend thanks to those citizens who are going to join you on that trip. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. I don't have a report, but I would like to acknowledge the reopening of our schools today and express my gratitude and my support to our educators, our school staff, our support staff on the first day back to school. And while this will no doubt be a very challenging year, it is a very important step in our recovery.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. If there are no other councillor reports. I thank you for those. We'll turn to agenda item 9, which is upcoming events. The Alberta Municipalities Conference and Trade Show in Red Deer next week, to which many will be attending. Councillor Melnick asked that we include September 30th on this list as National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. And our organizational meeting will be held on October 22nd. Are there any other dates or events upcoming that should be brought to Council's attention? Right, if not, thank you. We had a request to add 2 in-camera items. And if you might, I think Councillor Keller-Harempe and Councillor or Deputy Mayor Demota, if you could just, for the benefit of the public and without revealing the details of what is in camera, just give a sense of what might be on our agenda so the public can understand why we might be moving in camera, and indicate whether you would anticipate any council decision coming out of that. And if not, then I will let any members of the viewing public know that when we revert to open session, it will simply be for adjournment and there will be no more business discussed in public. Go ahead, Councillor Keller-Harempe.
Mine is just an update to council regarding a legal matter, and there'll be nothing coming out of in camera.
Thank you for that, Councillor Keller-Harempe. Deputy Mayor Demota.
Yeah, mine predominantly revolve around land matters, and nothing to come back to council for discussion afterwards.
Thank you for that. It is now 12:27. I will entertain a motion that we move in camera, and I will thank all those members of the public who have joined us on our Zoom platform today, and advise that when we reemerge into open session from our closed session, it will simply be for adjournment of our regular meeting, and there will be no further business discussed. So I thank you for joining us today, and Deputy Mayor Demota, I will take it that that is a motion that we now move in camera.
Yes, and just if we can keep this live off recording, just to discuss when we want to come back. I know that we have administration, and maybe somebody might need a break for lunch.
Understood.
For how long?
All right, I will call the question to move in camera. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Thank you all. I bid good day to all who are leaving us, and if administration can stop the recording. For returning councillors and administration, I think we have a separate link for the in-camera session has been circulated. Is there a time that suits best that we reconvene in closed session? It is now 12:30. Do we need more than half an hour?
Half an hour is good.
All right, so 1 o'clock, and there should be a link in your inbox for the in-camera session, and we will reconvene at 1 o'clock. Thank you all. See you then.